The scent of fresh coffee hung heavy in the opulent air of the exclusive club lounge, where high society gathered in a superficial display. Among the ornate dark wood chairs and crisp white tablecloths, I moved discreetly, observing the scene of ostentation and hollow laughter. The nobles, in their extravagant attire, were a sea of arrogant smiles and mocking glances, as if misery could simply be swept under the rug. But the past was far from forgotten. That afternoon, one noble stood out. His words were venomous, a direct hit. What's left of the king but a whisper of his former self, a phantom lost in his own delusions? The laughter that followed cut like knives. In this atmosphere, the air, thick with contempt, seemed to vibrate with it, while my hands trembled slightly under the weight of the tray. The figure of the vampire king entered through the door, his lost eyes wandering over the fragmented hall of aristocrats. He carried an aura of helplessness, his gaze hazy, as if distant, caught in a spiral of inaccessible memories. I felt his suffering pulse like a drum on a battlefield. I steadied my breath, silently revealing my gift. My touch had the power to soothe and connect with the deepest parts of one's being. But I knew nothing could be done here, surrounded by their scorn. The king was cornered, exposed to the mockery of those who should have served him, his condition a spectacle for those who coveted his throne. I kept the plight of the downtrodden in mind, but the king's vulnerability struck me with a harsh reality. As I moved through the lounge, glimpses of other faces flickered in my mind. Mothers searching for solace from their pains, children forgotten on street corners, shared memories clinging to the hope of a better tomorrow. And the king? He was a bundle of fragments from a lost legacy. Like a shattered chandelier, his story crumbled under the acidic gazes of the rejoicing nobles. I knew all this vanity was precarious, but what could I do in the presence of these aristocrats? My steps became measured, hidden affections growing with each cup I served, as I recalled a past that wasn't my own. Then something in the air shifted. The king approached, his gaze darkly fixed on me, a silent plea for understanding. I could feel the pain, the weight of his history hanging between us. In that moment, my frantic mind nestled among his memories. A fervent desire bloomed in my heart, to restore not only his dignity, but also what it meant to be a leader. Little did I know that this impulse would launch me on a journey to confront not only the sneering nobles, but the shadowy counselor himself, lurking in the palace's depths, concocting his wicked scheme. I had been called, without warning, to a destiny beyond comprehension, where memory was a power to be reclaimed. And when the king turned his gaze to me, the echo of his pain resonated amidst the nobles' laughter, challenging me to change the course of that dark story. The weight of the king's memories enveloped the room like a dense fog. Yet I also carried my own recollections. In the corner of the lounge, I found myself in a distant flashback. I remembered a time when the kingdom was majestic, with a strong king at its head, ruling with justice. The streets vibrated with celebration, and faces were joyful, not etched with contempt. But the light of that time had dimmed, like a sun hiding behind dark clouds. As the nobles laughed, my thoughts drifted to the king's tragic history. My heart ached with the pain I knew he carried. The weakness he now displayed was an affront to those who came before, a mockery not just of himself, but of the nobility he once embodied. He wasn't merely a ruler, he was a man battling the darkness that gripped his mind. The curse of his fragility made him an easy target for betrayal. The sneering nobles, with their sharp eyes, fed on the king's debility. With each laugh, they destabilized not only his spirit, but also the kingdom he governed. In that instant, I understood how repulsive it was. They reveled at the expense of a broken man. The shadowy counselor, a true predator in the palace's depths, seemed to be the mastermind behind this decay. He cultivated the king's fragility, knowing he could usurp power when the king could no longer stand on his own. As I served another coffee, I noticed movement among the group. A young noblewoman was listening intently to her counselor's words. And as if destiny were guiding me, a provocative idea flashed through my mind. If I could expose the counselor, perhaps I could turn the tide in the king's favor. But how? These questions swirled in my mind, a storm of uncertainties. Wandering through the lounge, I took note of the faces and the murmurs. Each laugh became a knife piercing my hopes. The king, by then, was trapped in a labyrinth of his own lost memories, and I needed to find a way to bring him back. Would the connection I'd established with him be enough? My touch had the potential to soothe restless souls, but he needed something more powerful, an artifact, a symbol that could represent his strength and connection to his lineage. It was then that a whisper reached me, the Ring of Valor. Legends spoke of it, a relic that held the dignity of his heritage. They said it not only revitalized memories, but also reclaimed the king's lost essence. But where could this key to the past be? More than a desire to uncover the truth, there was a deep call within me to act. If memory was power, then it was also my responsibility to reclaim it, not just for the king, but for all who had become shadows in their own lives. I needed a plan. A surge of determination solidified in my mind. With the king's gaze still fixed on me, I knew I couldn't fail. I wasn't just saving a man, I was fighting to restore the honor of a kingdom. The journey would be fraught with danger, but this had already become personal. It was a battle against the forces of mockery and betrayal, and the first clue would lead me to the castle, a place where every corridor whispered forgotten tales. By following the echoes of his memory, perhaps we could awaken the dignity that still slumbered in the king's heart. And so, the true fight began. The approach to the castle brought a new weight to my heart. The majesty of the towers that once inspired reverence now seemed a labyrinth of shadows where secrets were fiercely guarded. I knew the journey there would not only be physical, but a test of courage and determination. Each step represented not just the search for a ring, but a quest to reclaim the king's dignity and heal the wounds of a kingdom. The castle gate opened like a portal to an obscured world. The walls were adorned with tapestries that murmured tales of past glories, while a cold draught enveloped me, as if the palace itself was alive, breathing the corrupted memories of its history. Upon entering, the scent of mildew mixed with the perfume of dead flowers reminded me that not all beauty withstands time. In that decaying space, every shadow seemed to watch, as if waiting for an opportunity to whisper secrets. My first interaction was with the guards, who, with indifferent expressions, stood like stone, ready to refuse any approach. I barely swallowed my apprehension before audacity took hold of me. The way the nobles hurt the king had awakened something powerful within me. I couldn't let myself be intimidated. In my excursions through the vast castle grounds, I began to collect fragments of conversations, murmurs hinting at rivalries and betrayals. I planned my steps. Every corridor I traversed, every exchanged glance, all became a puzzle of clues leading to a single objective. One day, information led to a room beside the library where the shadowy counselor's presence was strong. His words were poisons that ensnared the nobles in his web, and I knew I had to reach him. There was something about the counselor I couldn't forget. It was the way he manipulated others' minds with a veil of honesty beneath an appealing facade that aroused my suspicion. I needed to go beyond the obvious and delve into the man's true nature. He was the key that could unlock the doors to a hidden kingdom. Pondering this, I held small encounters where I touched the nobles, calming their tormented souls while trying to bury the questions that almost echoed in my mind. Eventually, a moment of courage took root within me. In a remote corner of the castle, after a brief gesture of affection, I overheard a young noble speak of the Ring of Valor. "They say it's kept in a vault beneath the old council tower," he revealed casually. Feeling my pulse quicken, I understood that this could be the first step towards the king's salvation. However, the pressure on my determination mounted. My steps weren't discreet, and the alerted nobles always seemed to know more than they let on. Every smile I received was a reminder of the subtle espionage that permeated the place. But the need to reclaim the king's dignity outweighed my hesitation. With a plan in place, all that remained was to subtly influence each noble, respecting their individual spirits. The shadowy counselor was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and the ambush I would set would expose him to the world. The Ring of Valor was within my grasp, and I was one step closer to saving not just a man, but a kingdom in distress. Determined, I pressed on, unaware of the darkness that awaited around the next corner, but keenly aware of what was at stake. The battle had only just begun, and I was willing to face it with every fiber of my being. The light of hope was faint, but there, in the heart of darkness, I would find the path to restore the king's memory and dignity. The old council tower rose imposingly, like a monument laden with secrets. With each step, the atmosphere around me carried an invisible weight, as if the castle itself exhaled memories of betrayal. In the gloom, I advanced towards the spiral staircase, the steps groaning under my weight. Every sound echoed, and I knew I could be discovered at any moment. Urgency pulsed in my veins. Reaching the chamber door, the smell of mildew and the faint silence immobilized me. I peered through the crack in the door and saw the counselor, surrounded by nobles who listened to him in silence. He was manipulating their spirits, weaving a web of intrigue. "The king is a weakness we must eliminate," he said with a smile that blended sweetness and venom. My stomach churned. Something inside me boiled. I couldn't remain inert. With unexpected audacity, I decided the vault would be my first step. The relic kept there had to be found. I moved into the room with caution, observing the nobles' faces, unseen by them. The vault was beneath a nearby table, adorned with details that recalled the history of the royal lineage. With a surge of determination, I knelt to manipulate the vault's latch. My hands trembled, but the image of the king suffering under the nobles' mocking gazes propelled me forward. As I turned the lock, I heard another movement. The nobles were dispersing, but the counselor looked in my direction, his penetrating eyes focusing on me. Panic washed over me. "Who goes there?" His voice hissed like venom hanging in the air. The coldness of his gaze seemed to read my soul. I knew I had to act fast. "I am the kingdom's guardian, and I am here to stop the treachery you orchestrate," I exclaimed, but the insecurity in my voice betrayed my bravado. A bitter smile spread across his lips. He recognized me as an adversary now, and the atmosphere around us shifted. Nobles drew closer, shadows grew denser. The tension between us was palpable. I was cornered between the truth I needed to reveal and the power he refused to relinquish. The Ring of Valor was right behind me, and battle would be inevitable. It wasn't just a fight for an artifact, but a clash for the king's dignity and the kingdom's soul. The counselor moved, his presence almost tangible, but I had to stand firm. Every spark of courage within me screamed for me to advance. With renewed determination, I took a deep breath and prepared to face the counselor under the watchful eyes of the nobles. They wouldn't do what was right, but I had to be the voice that echoed amidst the silence of betrayal. I knew there was no turning back. The moment of truth had just begun. The atmosphere around me felt heavy, like a storm about to break. The counselor approached,
his wicked smile still on his lips, his eyes gleaming with the calculating coldness he had always possessed. He seemed amused by the unexpected confrontation, as if others' weakness were a play for his enjoyment. "Guardian? An intriguing word, but you seem to be nothing more than a child lost in an adult's game." He spat, his words cutting like blades. The pressure on me mounted. Words of courage floated in my mind, but each phrase trembled in my chest. What did he see in me? A usurper, a restless spirit, or a pawn to be manipulated? The shadows around us drew closer, a silent audience to the growing tension between us. "I am no child. I am the truth you fear," I exclaimed, trying to inject conviction into every syllable. I felt the weight of the nobles' gazes, their faces contorting between doubt and curiosity, as if awaiting a spectacle. I needed to act before this scene turned into a nightmare. The ring, the trove of memories it represented, was behind me, haunting me with every second. And then, with a sudden movement, I decided to act. I struck the vault's mechanism and opened it, revealing the ring's gleam. The light projected onto the faces around me, a burst of reflections that momentarily diverted the counselor's attention. I held the ring delicately, the pressure of its power pulsing through me like a roar of past battles. "This is what you wish to destroy, isn't it?" I challenged, raising the ring between us, its light illuminating our faces in a play of light and shadow. A murmur of recognition and confusion swept the room. Nobles began to shift, uneasy, their loyalties now in question. My senses were heightened. I could feel the tension and the shift in the air. Then the counselor regained his composure. With a look of contempt, he advanced. "Naive fool, that means little. True power lies with those who control minds, not hearts. What you fail to realize is that your effort is in vain." I focused on his eyes and saw fragility in the shadows dancing beneath his skin. He wasn't unbeatable. He was a mask, and I was about to tear it away. "Perhaps you have control, but there will be a price to pay. If we continue under your tyranny, we will lose all that remains of our dignity." As the words left my lips, I felt the strength of truth rooted in my voice. It wasn't just a fight for the ring.
It was a battle for the fates of everyone in the room. The nobles began to stir, divided between their loyalty to the king and their fear of the counselor. Furtive glances and whispers became a growing pressure in the space. The counselor then, in a last act of desperation, drew a dagger that glinted under the light. "If you want a confrontation, then so be it. What's at stake here is more than you can imagine." The tension reached its peak. The room pulsed like an anxious heart. And the instant he lunged at me with the dagger, everything transformed. An echo of intense and confusing emotions. What was right? What was wrong? Everything became a blur. I had to fight, not just for truth, but for everyone's survival. The moment of truth had arrived, but the outcome was unclear. It was a dance under light and shadow, and I was ready to play, even if it meant stepping into the darkness. Time slowed as the dagger cut through the air, tracing a path towards me. The scene before me became a blur. Instinctively, my body lunged sideways, every fiber of my being screaming in protest. The blade struck the wooden table behind me, embedding itself as a warning that the battle had already begun. I rose, my heart pounding, adrenaline surging through me. The counselor chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Unable to dodge the megalomaniacal fate you've imposed upon yourself, are you?" His mask of confidence was intact, but looking into his eyes, I saw that somewhere deep down there was fear. The power play was at a critical point, and I couldn't fail. The nobles watched, finally split between their loyalty to the king and the counselor's manipulation. A murmur began to rise among them, as if the seeds of doubt and insurrection were germinating in their minds. I couldn't miss this opportunity. Gathering my strength, I cried out, "You know tyranny is not the way. The king deserves another destiny, and this ring is the key." I turned quickly, gazing at the ring with determination. I held it firmly, reflecting the hopes of an entire kingdom. One of the nobles, closer than the others, took a step forward, his eyes reflecting doubt. "But the counselor has been our guide, our anchor. What if you are wrong?" "And what if I am right?" I retorted, allowing my voice to echo, solidifying the alliance that was to come. "We are imprisoned by a man who feeds on our weaknesses. What he offers is a gilded cage." In that instant, the counselor attacked again. He lunged forward, closing the space between us in a swift move, but this time I was prepared. I focused, awaiting the right moment. I channeled the energy of the moment, disarming his action with a shove that sent him stumbling. He was no longer the hunter. Now he was the prey. The nobles, their loyalties wavering, began to react. A group started to gather around me, and I saw expressions of determination taking shape on their faces. The counselor, sensing the shift, darted backward, seeking refuge in the shadows, but I wouldn't let him escape so easily. The ring in my hand began to glow, a burning flame that seemed to command the court's attention. "This is only the beginning," I warned him, my confidence growing with each passing moment. "Your reign of lies is coming to an end. Your tactics will no longer work." The words I cast were an echo of change, and slowly the nobles began to move in unison around me. The castle reverberated with the clamor for truth, and the counselor, now cornered, became a reflection of his own tyranny. The fears he had fed were now turning against him. The atmosphere became a storm, a battle not just for power, but for the essence of who we all were. In the center of the maelstrom, I felt the energy of past and present uniting under the ring's glow. True power lay not in minds, but in the choices we made and the alliances we forged. As the counselor prepared for a desperate defense, I noticed the expression on his face had changed. He was no longer a master, but a man on the brink of defeat. We needed to take the next step, and I was ready to end this confrontation. I knew the climax of truth was about to unfold, and the fate of many depended on the decision we made now. The moment for action was approaching, and with renewed determination, I was ready to face what came next. The tension in the air was almost palpable, pulsing like a heart out of sync. The counselor, now shrinking in his own insecurity, revealed himself to be more vulnerable than I ever thought possible. The room was filled with nobles, their loyalties wavering, and I realized that above all, I needed a final appeal to their humanity. "You," I began, raising my voice so all could hear, "we are at a moment of decision. History watches us, and if we do not take the right stand, we will be remembered as those who allowed tyranny to prevail. The counselor does not protect us, he feeds on our fear. It is time to reclaim our power." A murmur rippled through the room, and I saw some heads slowly nodding. The ring's glow was a light of hope, reflecting the truth that yearned to emerge from the depths of our hearts. This wasn't just a battle for control of the kingdom, it was a fight for dignity, for the future, and I would be the voice that echoed it into the abyss of uncertainty. The counselor, realizing his dominion was crumbling, made one last desperate move. Swiftly he raised the dagger he still held, but his eyes showed he was more lost than ever. "Don't forget," he snarled, "I know things about all of you, secrets that could shatter reputations." His voice trembled, but the threat was still present. Without hesitation, I approached, the ring glowing intensely in my hand. "The secrets you hold may have served their purpose once, but they are a weakness now, an open wound that will make us stronger." The mood in the room lifted, nobles began to move to my side, and confidence spread like wildfire. As the nobles positioned themselves, the counselor felt the pressure of their united voices. He looked at the ring in my hand, and for a brief moment, his features showed a flicker of doubt. I knew the truth had been revealed. He was no longer an unbeatable giant, but a small man trapped in his own lies. "Just as you manipulated trust, now you have lost it," I declared, and the room resonated with murmurs of approval. Victory was within reach, but there was still one final decision to be made. You nobles must choose. Continue under the yoke of disloyalty, or rise up for a kingdom that deserves to be free. Heads nodded in consensus, and the atmosphere shifted. The shadows around the counselor began to close in, and he realized the battle had turned. He was no longer the puppeteer, now he was a puppet caught in his own strings. I was finally able to conclude. We have the power to rewrite our history. Let this ring symbolize our unity and our determination to eradicate this evil. I held the ring high, its glow reflecting on the faces of the nobles who now aligned themselves with me. Then, in a final act of desperation, the counselor lunged forward, but it was already too late. What used to be a puppet had become a distant echo of tyranny. In seconds, the room filled with approving murmurs, a new oath to the future. And so, as we moved forward, the castle not only reborn under the sun of truth, but also strengthened with renewed confidence. We could finally look to the future together. As the guardians of the kingdom that had once been lost in shadows. The battle may have ended, but the path ahead was full of promises. The counselor might be gone, but the transformation had only just begun. With it, a new day dawned, and I, with the ring in my grasp, knew the kingdom was in good hands. The light of the new day filtered through the castle's high windows, bringing hope and renewal. The murmur of approval still resonated in the air, and as I looked around, I noticed the change in the nobles' expressions. We had won, but the work was only just beginning. I needed to reaffirm this victory in a formal assembly, where our unity could be solidified in a new pact. "To the people and court who hear me, we stand at a new dawn," I declared, my voice echoing. "We are no longer puppets of a tyrannical counselor. Now we are the architects of our destiny. With this ring, which represents our alliance, we propose to create a council committed to listening to the voices of the people, fighting for their rights, and keeping their hopes at the forefront." Some nobles hesitated, still with reservations, but many showed enthusiasm. The past had trapped them in shadows, but the idea of a shared future illuminated their faces. When I mentioned that true strength came from responsibility and understanding, a profound silence fell over the room. Doubt about the old order began to dissipate. "As for him," questioned a noble, breaking the silence, referring to the counselor, "why not punish him for his betrayal?" The question echoed, and within me a dilemma began to form. The idea of vengeance was tempting. However, the desire to reverse the cycle of violence and build a new kingdom was stronger. "We will not seek vengeance," I replied, resolute. "True strength is revealed in the ability to forgive and understand. We will use this opportunity to show that we are greater than our rivalries." A murmur of approval spread, and the nobles began to nod, recognizing the need for change. As I outlined the principles of the new council, I felt the grandeur of what we were about to create. It would be a new era of governance, where the people not only existed, but were heard and respected. Thus, I witnessed a movement growing. The shadows of tyranny were dissipating, and in their place, the seeds of a new kingdom emerged. I realized that the battle was far from over, but with the ring in my hand, I felt an incredible determination. The transformation had only just begun, and with the alliance solidified, the light of hope shone brightly. Together, we would face whatever lay ahead, always guided by kindness and the courage to choose a different path. The kingdom was in motion, and I was ready to lead it towards a future that, finally, was ours to shape.